kind of begin any of these talks thinking, how am I going to distill everything I have to say in the space of 5, 10 or whatever minutes. But let me begin by saying that I was actually flying out from Delhi on the night of August the 4th. So there was, for days beforehand, all the Kashmiris that I knew and my friends were, there was this thing in the air that all of these troops are being moved in, something's afoot. I landed here on the morning of the 5th to find out that the autonomy of the state had gone and that it had been revoked, and that there was also the bifurcation. I remember thinking on the luggage trolley at Heathrow, thinking, no, they couldn't have done that. No, surely they couldn't. Not like this, but they had. And since then it's just been relentless, just trying to draw attention to what has happened, because it is just so completely, incredibly unjustifiable. There is no consent that has been sought of the people here. So I'm speaking as a Kashmiri, I'm speaking also here as somebody who teaches politics in IR. So just a set of points. I think that this is not the communications lockdown. Firstly, the way they did it, by bringing in these troops, by silencing the people for weeks before any kind of communication was allowed. So even now, SMS, prepaid phones, which is what a lot of people rely on, is not functional. And even the landlines and the postpaid, some of it was actually only opened up maybe 10 days ago when the US hearing was about to happen, just 10 days before that or a week before that. So there is a blatant disregard for what anyone thinks. And I want to make sense of it and argue that this is wrong and unjust. And this is happening partly as a result, in large part as a result of the political project that is ongoing in India right now. It is the Hindutva political project, which is a political use of religion. And at this point, they are exercising, arbitrary power in Kashmir and gambling on different bets of resignation or indignation. There is no strategy that anyone can think of, and if you logically follow what they have been doing to its conclusion, the eventualities are almost too scary to think about. You would, I guess, know about the fact that 20-something MEPs mostly of far-right European parties were taken there on a tour of a deserted city and organized by an NGO with all kinds of dodgy backstories, which are all out in the public now, at the same time that Indian opposition leaders and MPs are not allowed to go there. So there's just this way in which this whole thing is happening with an attitude of we're doing it because we can. And part of it cannot be understood unless you factor in the Islamophobic element which is central to the Hindutva project. It is the fact that these people are Muslims, and that's constantly referred to. Well, the problem is only in these specific regions, and these are Muslims. Is one crucial thing not to miss. The second aspect is the way in which the rhetoric of development has been used. So throughout, the official stance has been, in many of the speeches, including of the Indian Prime Minister, that this is about development. This is good for the people themselves, yet the people's consent is not being asked for. By any standards of democratic principles, the idea that people should be allowed to dissent is totally flouted. So elderly women who were released because they were protesting, were released on the condition. There are things that they have to sign to say that which forbid them from speaking to the media. So there is an understanding that this is unjustifiable, it is completely unpopular, and that letting people speak will expose it for what it is, which is why they've gone for all of these draconian measures. The Islamophobic thing is also relevant because terror is used as this master narrative that is allowing them to do whatever. And Andrew pointed out some of that history of Kashmir, and it goes way back, but it's certainly the attempt to project it as a kind of ancient hatred situation where Muslims and Hindus have always hated each other is not borne out in any sense by historical evidence. Religions have coexisted in Kashmir, and the other thing about Kashmiri Pandits, since that was brought up, and to those of you who might not be familiar, that is something that is consistently brought up as, again, another way of rationalizing what is being done, especially by people who support the Hindutva project, that what about Kashmiri Pandits? And this discourse of competing victimhoods is stopping people from asking the very fundamental question that all massacres ought to be investigated, but that does not happen. So in that sense, that divide between the Kashmiri communities continues to be actually actively fostered. And the state of exception. So there is no, when one thinks about the rule of law or law and order, the law is in a permanent state of exception. There are these emergency powers that have been in place, not only there, but yes, also there, for over 2 decades, and there have been no prosecutions in any single cases like the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. So it is, maybe it is naive of us to expect the people who are doing this to actually address this, and I think this is why it is important for people outside of India to also keep raising the point that the international community has to take a more active interest in and a stance for creating any kind of peace or justice, or in however one might want to sequence it. And in my written testimony, I have talked about what many of us scholars who work on Kashmir have for a long time argued, that these are the things that ought to happen in the short term, in the medium term, and in the long run. And one hopes that that would be the case, but it just seems sad and scary at the moment, and the push, if anything, is towards a more extreme situation. With the winter lying ahead, there's just this push of Kashmir, where Kashmiris are literally being shown every day, every other day, that there's nothing you can do about it. We will do these things, we'll stop you from communicating, we'll revoke the autonomy, we'll bifurcate the state, and we'll bring these, far-right MEPs. We won't let you speak. And what will you do about it? It's literally that kind of a situation, to put it very bluntly. And the only reason the people there are surviving is because of their resilience. And if you think about the fact that if there was a strategy to any of this, then you can keep the people silent for the winter, but then there comes spring. So it seems I keep trying to say this at every forum. If there is a strategy here, one can't see it. And if you follow the logic of what they are doing to its conclusion, then that's, I would argue, too scary to premeditate, especially for the kind of political project that is unfolding in India right now. This is, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but this is a situation where MPs have gone and garlanded killers. This is a situation where people have on camera boasted about killing people from minority faiths, specifically Muslims. People have been assassinated for speaking up, regional journalists. So this is I've said it, I think it's a proto-fascist trajectory. I think we all should care, and I think that part of it is understanding how the Indian political system is trying to subvert the constitution, is completely subjugating and oppressing the Kashmiris, and they are prepared, I think, to try and silence any Indians also who speak about it. So there were a few Indian activists, and specifically women, who led various, 2 or 3, and I have the reports, trips to Kashmir, and they documented all of these things, and these are not heard in the Indian media. And in one case, she was also, Kavita Krishnan, they were stopped from even playing the film at the Press Council of India in Delhi. So it's, all in all, it's just a very tragic situation, and as people who care, I just wish that we would all just try to do whatever we can to keep pointing out that this is wrong and unjust, and it needs change, and it cannot just come from within, because they're bent upon vandalizing the principles that one would attest to a country being a democracy. That they've bifurcated the territory into Ladakh, but kept Jammu and Kashmir together is politically useful for them because of the votes in Jammu, which is Hindu majority, following on from a massacre that took place at the time of partition. So there's that. Then making it into a union territory is strategic, because then the Jammu and Kashmir police reports directly to the Home Minister of India rather than to anyone in the state. And the Home Minister of India is Amit Shah, and who's the Prime Minister's right-hand man, and there's a long history there that should be worrying to anyone. But to just give you a little idea, he referred to people as termites earlier during the election campaign, and these people were people that he thought were Muslim immigrants in Assam, where they're implementing the National Register of Citizenship, which is also potentially rendering nearly 1.9 million people stateless. So there's that. But in terms of the strategy, they have no strategy in terms of managing given what I want to say is that given what they have done to the people in Kashmir, and specifically Kashmir here in the valley, what can they now hope for? Because they have imprisoned, as Andrew said at that parliament event, it's the equivalent of imprisoning the Ulster Unionist leadership. They've imprisoned everyone, everyone across the board, and made every Kashmiri voice irrelevant, including the ones that were pro-India, and silencing every single person. So what is the logic of that? How do you then see, from the point of view of an outside, from an Indian point of view, what's the strategy of doing that? Where can it possibly lead? You cannot turn people into automatons. You cannot go inside them and change their hearts and minds, especially not after what has just transpired. So what's going to happen in 6 months' time? That's my big worry. There's no kind of India strategy here. And my fear is that relying upon the procedures from only within India, whether it's the law or the constitution or whatever, is not enough at this point. Because I feel like this is what's causing the problem, and it cannot therefore also be part of the solution that we hope for. It's important. It's not just happening far away, and those countries that always go to war with each other and are forever fighting because they're just not civilized. That's not it. Obviously, you know that, but get other people to see that. Get your representatives to care. Ask your MPs. It's not just always. The state-centric solution hasn't happened, right? So it has to come from the ground up. Ask your MPs. Ask your media. Whoever, whatever you read, ask them why haven't they said anything about it. Can they please say something about it? Amplify the voices that matter. Ensure that we keep speaking. One of the things I'll conclude with this, Andrew. So that immigration officer, when I was leaving on the night of the 4th, looked at my passport and he said, "You're Kashmiri," and I said, "Yes, I am. This is night of the 4th." And then he says, "I used to know a professor called a long time ago, and then I don't know what happened to him. He just disappeared." And that was so weird, especially given the fact that I just said, "Look, I'm running late for my flight. Please do what you have to do and let me go on." So please amplify the voices that matter. There are enough and more resources out there. Please get people to care, because these are all interlinked. These injustices are all interlinked.